Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every woman's life when her silence speaks louder than every argument she swallowed, every tear she hid, and every truth she tried to explain. It's the kind of silence that doesn't come from fear, weakness, or giving up. No, this silence rises from the ashes of everything she endured. It is the quiet moment when she finally realizes she doesn't have to beg to be valued, she doesn't have to fight to be heard, and she doesn't have to break herself trying to hold together what someone else keeps tearing apart. When a woman stops talking, stops explaining, stops defending, she isn't losing strength, she is reclaiming it. Because her silence is the final chapter of her patience and the first chapter of her power. Silence is a decision, not surrender, and when a woman chooses it, it carries more truth than any argument she could ever speak. To understand this deeply, you must first understand what comes before that silence, the energy she invests, the hope she holds, the patience she stretches to its very limit. A woman doesn't fall silent overnight. It is a long process of watching her kindness be misunderstood, her words be dismissed, her feelings be minimized, and her efforts be taken for granted. She begins by speaking up, not to win or control, but because she still believes things can get better. Every time she expresses her hurt, every time she tries to communicate, every time she explains her needs, she is saying, "I care enough to try." But when those words fall on deaf ears, she slowly learns that not everyone deserves her voice. Silence becomes the moment she stops trying to convince someone of her worth. It is her way of saying she's tired of repeating herself to someone who was never listening in the first place. People assume silence means she has accepted defeat, but they fail to understand that her silence is her choosing to take back her strength. She is no longer participating in battles where her feelings are weaponized against her. She is no longer handing out explanations to someone who only listens to argue and never to understand. Silence becomes her decision to protect her peace instead of proving her point. It is a conscious choice, one rooted in clarity, not fear. A woman's silence carries more power than her loudest frustration because it is no longer emotional, it is logical. She has studied the patterns, she has seen the result. She has watched the same behavior repeat itself no matter how many chances she gave. Silence is her stepping away from the cycle. Instead of engaging in the same painful conversation again and again, she decides to conserve her energy. She withdraws because she finally understands that nothing she says will change someone who is committed to misunderstanding her. She withdraws because she no longer wants to fight battles that drain her spirit. Silence is not avoidance, it is acceptance. It is the acceptance that she cannot teach someone how to care. She cannot force someone to value her. She cannot make someone grow who refuses to look in the mirror. Her silence becomes her boundary. It becomes the line she draws between what she used to tolerate and what she will no longer allow. It is the moment she takes her power back from someone who once believed they could play with her emotions. Her silence is not the absence of feelings, it is the presence of self-respect. And in that silence, she begins to see herself clearly. She begins to understand that her voice matters, and if someone does not appreciate it, she must save it for someone who will. Her silence becomes the bridge that carries her away from situations that make her shrink and toward places where she can breathe again. It becomes her way of healing, because speaking into a void only keeps her stuck in the same emotional place. By choosing silence, she chooses growth. She chooses to let go of trying to fix what didn't want to be fixed. She chooses to stop pouring her love into a cup with no bottom. Silence is not the death of her strength, it is the birth of her wisdom. She has learned that not every action deserves a reaction. Not every disrespect deserves a response. Not every argument deserves her energy, and not every person deserves access to her heart. Silence becomes her reset, her moment to rebuild herself, her quiet declaration that she will not allow herself to be drained any longer. She does not raise her voice because she no longer needs anyone's permission to walk away. She does not argue because she already knows the truth. She does not beg because she has found her dignity again. So when a woman becomes silent, understand this: she is not surrendering. She is choosing herself. She is choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and strength over struggle. Her silence is the loudest message she will ever send, and it comes from a place of power, not pain. Patience has limits, and when it comes to a woman's heart, those limits are often far deeper and wider than anyone realizes. A woman will give chance after chance, not because she is weak, but because she genuinely believes in the good in people. She hopes that the person she loves will wake up one day and understand her worth. She forgives, not because she has forgotten the hurt, but because she is trying to protect the connection she values. But over time, every disappointment, every lie, every broken promise, and every moment where she felt unseen slowly chips away at her patience. It doesn't vanish suddenly, it erodes little by little like waves wearing down a rock. Even she doesn't realize when her patience is reaching its end. But once it does, once that final straw falls, there is nothing in the world that can rebuild what has already collapsed inside her. A woman's patience is a quiet force. She won't make a scene while she's trying to keep the relationship together. She'll explain gently at first, then with a little more firmness, then with exhaustion. She'll find herself repeating the same concerns, the same requests, the same pain, hoping that maybe this time she'll be heard. But when her words keep getting ignored or twisted against her, she starts to understand that she is the only one fighting. That realization is painful because she remembers every moment she stayed, every moment she compromised, every moment she swallowed her own hurt to keep peace. Patience becomes a burden when only one person is carrying it. And yet she keeps choosing to care. That's what makes a woman's patience so unique and so misunderstood. People look at her and assume she will always stay because she has stayed so many times before. They believe they can break her heart and she will still show up tomorrow. They mistake her endurance for blind loyalty. They think her patience is endless because she has never reached her breaking point in front of them. But every woman has a moment when she finally understands that she cannot continue giving chances to someone who uses them as excuses to never change. That moment doesn't come with shouting or dramatic exits. It comes quietly, often while she is alone, thinking about how much she has given and how little she has received in return. She remembers the nights she cried silently, the times she forgave without being asked, the times she tried to justify behavior she knew wasn't right. She remembers the promises that sounded sweet but meant nothing. And suddenly, something shifts inside her. Her patience, the thing she protected and stretched for so long, finally tears. Once it tears, the relationship is no longer the same. Something inside her has ended. When her patience is gone, she doesn't fight anymore. She doesn't beg anyone to stay. She doesn't ask to be understood. She doesn't argue about loyalty, effort, or love. She becomes calm. And that calmness is not peace. It is the end of her emotional investment. It is the moment she stops looking for change because she has accepted the truth. The person she once trusted will never be who she hoped they would become. That acceptance sets her free, even if it breaks her heart for a while. People often realize too late what her patience truly meant. They look back and remember how forgiving she was, how supportive she was, how understanding she was. They remember how she stayed when anyone else would have left, and it hits them that she didn't stay out of weakness. She stayed because her love was strong. But even the strongest love cannot survive when it is constantly wounded. When she walks away silently but permanently. Because once her patience ends, she's not leaving to punish anyone. She's leaving because she finally values herself more than the pain she kept accepting. Her patience had limits, and reaching those limits doesn't make her heartless. It makes her finally aware of her own worth. She stops waiting for someone to change because now she is ready to change her own life. She stops hoping for someone to understand her because she has decided to understand herself. And she stops giving what she never receives because she knows she deserves a love that doesn't require her to suffer to keep it alive. Silence reveals truth in a way that spoken words never can. When a woman stops arguing, stops explaining, stops trying to defend her heart, she isn't becoming distant without reason. She is seeing things clearly for the first time. Silence is not confusion, it is clarity. It is that moment when the noise of excuses, broken promises, and repeated disappointments finally settles and she can hear her own intuition again. She realizes she has been trying to change what never wanted to change. She sees the difference between someone who cares and someone who only cares when they feel her slipping away. Silence becomes her lens, sharpening her view of what is real and what was only an illusion she held onto out of hope. In silence, she begins to understand the emotional patterns she once overlooked. She starts to notice how often she apologized for things that weren't her fault. She remembers how many times she accepted explanations that didn't match actions. She recalls the moments where she felt alone even while standing right beside the person she loved. When she goes quiet, she's not avoiding the truth, she's absorbing it. She's letting reality settle into her bones, and once it settles, she cannot unsee it. Her silence reveals not only the truth about her partner, but also the truth about herself. She sees how much she gave, how much she tried, how much she tolerated. She recognizes her own strength, her own endurance, her own willingness to forgive beyond what most people would ever consider. But she also sees the areas where she betrayed herself. Times when she stayed quiet to keep the peace, times when she accepted less hoping it would eventually become more, times when she tried to convince herself that love alone could fix everything. The truth she discovers in silence is not always easy, but it is honest and it frees her. Silence becomes her emotional mirror. While she is quiet on the outside, inside she is questioning everything she once believed. She measures actions against promises and finally understands why she felt so tired. She realizes that the relationship was surviving on her effort alone, and once that truth becomes clear, her heart starts to shift. This shift is subtle at first. She stops expecting. She stops hoping for something different. She stops trying to interpret mixed signals. In silence, she sees the full picture, not the edited version she wanted to believe in. Her silence also reveals the truth about the other person's intentions. When she no longer chases, no longer presses for answers, no longer tries to make things work, she observes how little effort they put in without her pushing. She notices whether they step up or disappear. She sees if they value her presence or take advantage of her absence. Silence exposes who truly cares. Anyone can make promises, but silence reveals action. Anyone can express love when things are easy, but silence reveals who fights to keep her. Anyone can talk. Silence reveals who listens. Silence also reveals emotional maturity, or the lack of it. Some people panic when she becomes quiet because they only love the version of her that was constantly trying to fix things. They weren't prepared for the version of her that demands nothing but expects everything through actions. They weren't prepared for the woman who no longer argues, because arguing means she still hopes. Silence means she no longer does, and in that very moment her silence becomes louder than her pain ever was. In silence she watches behaviors instead of words. She pays attention to patterns instead of apologies. She sees consistency or the absence of it. She stops giving the benefit of the doubt and starts giving herself the benefit of truth. This truth may hurt, but it awakens her. It makes her stronger, wiser, more aware. She becomes emotionally sober, no longer drunk on potential, but grounded in reality. She doesn't need to announce that she's done. She doesn't need to explain what went wrong for the 100th time. Her silence becomes her explanation. It becomes her answer. It becomes her goodbye long before she physically leaves. Because once the truth is revealed in her silence, she can never return to the version of herself who accepted less than she deserved. Silence shows her everything she tried not to see. It shows her who someone truly is and who she must now become. Quiet strength is the most powerful form of strength, and when a woman chooses calm over chaos, it is not because she lacks emotion, but because she has mastered it. People often misunderstand loudness for power and silence for weakness, but they forget that storms are loud while earthquakes are silent, and it's the silent force that shakes the ground the most. A woman's quiet strength comes from everything she has lived through, everything she has risen from, and everything she has learned about herself. She doesn't need to shout to prove her worth. She doesn't need to argue to show her boundaries. She doesn't need to fight to display her courage. Her strength is written in her patience, in her endurance, in the way she carries herself through moments that would break others. Quiet strength looks like holding herself together in moments when the world expects her to fall apart. It looks like walking away with dignity instead of staying and begging to be understood. It looks like choosing peace over the comfort of familiar pain. A woman who holds quiet strength does not react impulsively. She listens, she observes, she understands, and then she makes decisions with a clarity that comes from deep internal power. Her strength is not about overpowering others. It is about mastering herself. She knows that anyone can be loud, but not everyone can be calm when hurt, misjudged, or disrespected. This quiet strength grows from the battles she fought silently, the nights she cried and still showed up the next morning, the moments she had to be strong for others while no one knew who was strong for her, the times she stayed soft even after the world tried to harden her. She learned that her voice doesn't always need to be raised to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful thing she can do is remain still, because that stillness carries a message. She refuses to allow anyone else to disturb her inner balance. A woman's quiet strength becomes most visible in moments of disappointment, when she chooses silence instead of revenge, when she decides to walk away instead of engaging in pointless battles, when she forgives for her own peace instead of for the other person's comfort. These choices require far more strength than any argument ever could. It takes courage to control yourself when everything inside you wants to scream. It takes wisdom to respond with calm when you've been provoked. It takes maturity to protect your heart without closing it off completely. Quiet strength means she knows who she is. She doesn't need validation from those who don't appreciate her. She doesn't need approval from those who misunderstand her. She doesn't need attention from those who once overlooked her. She trusts her own intuition more than she trusts empty words. She relies on her inner compass, not the opinions of others. This is why her silence is powerful, because it comes from a place of confidence, not fear. She has learned that she is whole on her own, and that realization makes her unstoppable. Her quiet strength also empowers her to love deeply without losing herself. She can give her heart, but she will not hand over her identity. She can be vulnerable, but she will not be broken. She can care, but she will not allow herself to be used. This balance is not something she was born with. It is something she developed through experience. Every time she stood back up after being knocked down, her strength became quieter, deeper, more unshakable. She no longer needs to prove anything to anyone because she has already proven it to herself. In relationships, her quiet strength becomes a mirror. It reflects who truly values her and who was only comfortable with her when she was trying to please them. It exposes who steps up when she steps back and who disappears when she stops trying. Her calmness becomes a test that only genuine hearts can pass. She doesn't threaten to leave. She doesn't beg for effort. She simply gives space, and in that space the truth shows itself. Quiet strength is the art of choosing yourself without needing to announce it. It is the discipline of protecting your peace even when your heart is hurting. It is the maturity to know that you don't need to win every argument to win your life. It is the power to walk away from what doesn't grow you without carrying hatred in your heart. A woman with quiet strength is not cold. She is controlled. She is not emotionless. She is emotionally intelligent. She is not weak. She is wise enough to know that not every battle deserves her energy. Her strength is not loud, but it is undeniable. It is not dramatic, but it is life-changing. It is not visible to everyone, but it shapes her entire world. Quiet strength is the kind of power that cannot be shaken, cannot be manipulated, cannot be taken. It is the kind of power that comes from within, and once she finds it, no one can ever silence her again. Her silence is self-respect, and that truth becomes clear the moment she finally stops trying to prove her worth to someone who was never willing to see it. A woman does not become silent because she has nothing left to say. She becomes silent because she realizes her voice is being wasted. Every explanation she gave, every feeling she opened up about, every plea for effort or honesty was not just communication, it was an act of love. When she stopped speaking, it is because she understands that continuing to explain herself would mean continuing to disrespect her own heart. Silence becomes her shield, her boundary, her declaration that she deserves better than the pain she kept trying to rise above. Self-respect doesn't always show up as bold or dramatic action. Sometimes it appears in the quiet decision to no longer engage in conversations that go nowhere, arguments that repeat themselves, or situations that make her feel small. She realizes that her emotional energy is precious, and giving it to someone who cannot or will not value it is a form of self-betrayal. So she chooses silence, not to punish anyone, but to protect herself. That choice is powerful. It requires strength to not respond when she feels hurt, to stay calm when she is misunderstood, and to walk away from a connection she once believed in. Her silence is her reclaiming her identity after losing parts of herself trying to make things work. She begins to understand the difference between holding on and holding herself together. She remembers the night she cried quietly because she didn't want to argue anymore. She remembers the time she accepted less just to keep peace. She remembers lowering her expectations each time someone failed to rise to meet them. Eventually, she looks at herself and recognizes that she has been bending so much she is close to breaking. That realization creates a shift inside her. She stops chasing, stops asking, stops insisting. It's not that she suddenly stops caring. It's that she starts caring about herself. Silence becomes the doorway to her healing. Once she stops trying to convince someone of her worth, she finally has the space to rediscover it for herself. She begins to reconnect with the parts of her she neglected, her dreams, her confidence, her joy, her inner peace. She starts to see how much of herself she poured into someone who didn't appreciate the depth of her effort. She notices how drained she has been, how heavy her heart felt, how much lighter she becomes when she stops trying so hard. Her silence becomes the pause that allows her to breathe again. Others may interpret her silence however they choose. Some will think she is being cold. Some will think she is giving up. Some will believe she is trying to avoid conflict. But the truth is far deeper. She is choosing dignity. She is choosing not to fight battles that diminish her. She is choosing to rise above behaviors that once pulled her down. She is choosing to respond with grace when anger would be easier. She is choosing to walk away from chaos even though her heart is still healing. Her silence also tests the people around her. It reveals who genuinely cares enough to understand her, who asks what's wrong without being told, who makes an effort without being pushed, and who disappears the moment she stops trying. Silence uncovers everything that words used to cover. It shows who values her presence and who took it for granted. It shows who wants to make things right and who only wanted things easy. In this way, silence becomes not only self-respect but self-discovery. Through her silence, she also learns to set boundaries. She stops giving unlimited access to those who misuse it. She stops tolerating behaviors that hurt her. She stops accepting apologies without change. She stops being available to people who were never available to her. These boundaries aren't loud, they don't need to be. They sit quietly, protecting her, reminding her that she deserves to be treated with kindness, consistency, and effort. Self-respect is not about being perfect or emotionless. It's about recognizing her value even when someone else fails to. It's about knowing she deserves love that doesn't exhaust her, loyalty that doesn't disappear when inconvenient, and truth that doesn't need to be dragged out of someone. Her silence is a declaration that she will no longer negotiate her worth. She is no longer begging to be seen, heard, or chosen. In the end, her silence is not rejection. It is redirection. It is her turning inward, choosing herself, and rebuilding her strength. It is her stepping away from what hurt her and stepping toward what will heal her. It is her honoring her soul enough to walk away from anything that makes it feel smaller. Her silence is self-respect, and there is nothing more powerful or more transformative than a woman who finally realizes she deserves more than what she stayed quiet for. When a woman gets silent, the relationship is already over in her heart, because silence is never her first language. A woman speaks, explains, forgives, reasons, tries, hopes, and believes long before she ever becomes quiet. Her silence is not a mood, it is a conclusion. It is the moment she realizes that staying is hurting her more than leaving ever could. When she goes silent, she isn't trying to win an argument. She's done participating in a battle that only she was fighting. She isn't seeking attention, she's accepting reality. Her silence is the emotional goodbye she whispers to herself before she ever takes a physical step out the door. It is the moment her heart shuts the door long before her feet do. This silence is different from the temporary pauses she used to take while trying to calm herself. This silence is final. It comes after she has replayed every moment of the relationship in her mind, studied every pattern, believed every promise, and forgiven every mistake until she no longer recognizes the woman she became in the process. When she stops reacting, it's because she already emotionally let go. She stops questioning because she stopped caring about the answers. She stops checking because she knows nothing will change. She stops trying to explain her feelings because she knows they will be dismissed like they always were. When she gets silent, she begins to detach quietly. She starts to pull her heart back piece by piece. She withdraws her hopes first, then her expectations, then her emotions, until the version of her that once fought so hard is no longer there. She becomes calm, not the kind of calm that comes from peace, but the calm that comes from acceptance. This acceptance is what truly ends a relationship, because once a woman accepts that someone cannot love her the way she deserves, she no longer waits for improvement. She no longer clings to potential. She no longer tries to rewrite reality into something that feels softer. Her silence becomes the proof that the love she once poured into someone has finally returned to herself. And while those around her may not notice the shift immediately, the person she is silent toward eventually does. They feel the absence of her attention, the absence of her concern, the absence of her emotional investment. They feel the distance in the way her words become shorter, her tone becomes colder, and her presence becomes lighter. They sense the emptiness where her effort used to live. This is when they usually panic, because they mistake her previous forgiveness for a guarantee that she would never leave. They believed her patience was infinite, her loyalty unbreakable, her love unconditional. They didn't realize her silence was her final chapter. Her silence also reflects the emotional wounds she carried long before she stopped speaking. Every ignored feeling, every broken promise, every time she felt alone in the relationship created layers inside her. She tried to fix them with hope. She tried to heal them with love. She tried to explain them with words. But eventually she learned that some wounds cannot be healed by the same person who caused them. When she stops trying, she isn't giving up on love, she's giving up on hurting. She chooses not to keep reopening emotional wounds just to show someone how deeply they cut her. In silence, she also begins to rebuild herself. She starts remembering who she was before the disappointments piled up. She begins reconnecting with her strength, her joy, her inner voice. She reflects on how much she sacrificed and how much she tolerated, and she promises herself she won't go back to that version of her again. Silence becomes her bridge to freedom. It becomes her way of emotionally stepping out before she physically walks away. By the time others realize she's gone, she's already been gone in her heart for a long time. A woman's silence is also her way of preventing chaos. She doesn't want arguments, explosions, or drama. She doesn't want to destroy what little was left. She simply wants peace. And sometimes the only way to create peace is to remove herself from the noise completely. Her silence protects her from saying things that will hurt her later. It protects her from engaging in battles that won't matter. It protects her from investing in a connection that no longer exists. When she walks away after being silent for so long, it may shock others, but it never shocks her. She has been preparing for that moment long before she takes her final step. By then, she has cried her tears, accepted her truth, and mourned the relationship silently in her heart. She leaves without announcement, without anger, without regret. Her silence has already said everything she needed to say. Once a woman's heart closes, no amount of apologies, promises, or sudden effort can easily reopen it. Because her silence did not come from impulse, it came from exhaustion, it came from clarity, it came from a deep understanding that she deserves a love that makes her feel seen, valued, and cherished, not a love that forces her to fight to be heard. When a woman gets silent, the relationship is no longer alive inside her. It has ended quietly, quietly enough that no one heard the goodbye, but loudly enough that she felt it with her whole soul. A woman's silence is never the beginning of weakness. It is always the final chapter of her transformation. It is where her patience ends and her self-respect begins. It is where truth becomes undeniable, where her strength becomes unshakable, and where her heart finally chooses peace over pain. Her silence is the moment she realizes that she deserves a love that doesn't break her spirit just to keep it alive, a loyalty that doesn't disappear when she finally needs it, and a partner who listens before she ever has to raise her voice. Her silence is her rebirth. It is her reclaiming her power after giving too much of it away. It is her stepping out of a cycle that drained her and stepping into a future that will nurture her. The world may misunderstand her silence, but she doesn't live for the world's approval. She lives for her inner peace, her dignity, her freedom, and her healing. And once she rises from that silence, she becomes someone stronger, wiser, and impossible to break the same way again. To every woman who has ever been pushed to quiet her voice, let this be a reminder: your silence is not your weakness, it is your awakening. And once you choose yourself, there is no greater strength in the world. Good luck to each one of you who is on your own journey of growth, clarity, and self-respect. May you find the courage to walk away from what hurts you and the strength to walk toward what heals you. Thank you for listening, thank you for feeling, and thank you for understanding the power that lives inside a woman's silence. May you carry that power with you always.